Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 12th of February. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast here on Arirang TV. Great that you could join us. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The plenary vote on Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo is scheduled to be held on this Thursday. The main opposition party, however, is leaning towards rejecting his nomination. President Park Geun-hye hails the opening of a cultural content centre north of Seoul, saying it marks the start of a new era for Korea to become a cultural powerhouse. Plus, US President Barack Obama asked Congress to give him permission to formally use military force against the terrorist group that calls itself Islamic State. He asserts the request is not for another ground war. Our top story this morning, it was another tough day in the hot seat for President Park's pick to be the country's next Prime Minister. On the second and final day of his confirmation hearing on Wednesday, Lee Wan-koo had to field aggressive questions about his personal finances and his alleged attempts to manipulate the media. The main opposition party says it isn't planning on giving Lee's nomination the green light. Park Geun-hye starts us off.
The second day of Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo's confirmation hearing was as tough as the first. Lawmakers from both parties continued their inquiries into a series of allegations against the former ruling Saenuri Party floor leader. In an apparent show of support for the nominee, his fellow Saenuri Party lawmakers focused primarily on questions about his future policy goals. Lawmakers from the main opposition party, however, pressed the 65-year-old nominee and more than a dozen witnesses on allegations surrounding his family's wealth, his involvement in real estate speculation, and questions about his election campaign funds. Meanwhile, at a main opposition party meeting earlier in the day, new chairman Moon Jae-in hinted that his party might not confirm the nominee. He said that despite hopes of finally confirming a replacement for incumbent Prime Minister Chung Hong-won, it might be difficult. Moon said his party will decide its official stance on the nominee Thursday morning following the hearing. Current Prime Minister Chung Hong-won had tendered his resignation after the government faced harsh criticism for its botched handling of the Seoul ferry disaster in late April last year. But Chung has stayed at his post as two previous nominees both withdrew their names from consideration due to allegations surrounding their past. All eyes are now on Lee and whether he can get through this hearing process. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And as a follow-up to Ji-won's report, the plenary vote on Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo is scheduled to be held on this Thursday. The main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, wants the plenary session postponed, but the ruling Saenuri Party is expected to hold the vote as planned. The opposition party has signalled that it might reject the nomination. The options available to the NPAD include voting against the nominee or completely boycotting the vote. Now to the latest advance in President Park Geun-hye's push towards her envisioned creative economy for Korea. The government opened a cultural complex north of Seoul on Wednesday that allows businesses of all sizes to collaborate and create new markets for cultural products. Seo Chae-sun reports.
Korea's homegrown non-verbal performance, Nanta, recently saw its accumulated audience number surpass 10 million worldwide. The longest-running show in Korea, featuring chefs prepping for a wedding banquet, was created by local actor-turned-producer Song Seung-hwan, who converged his childhood memory of his mother in the kitchen and the traditional Korean beats of samulori. Song, who marked the opening of the government's Cultural Creativity Complex on Wednesday, said he overcame many financial hurdles in the process of breathing life into his idea. The new creativity zone, in cooperation with entertainment and food conglomerate CJ, will cater to culturally creative minds like Song from the initial stages to global commercialization.
컨텐츠의 기획, 제작, 구현에 이르는 가치 사슬 전반을 지원하고 그 성과를 인재 양성과 기술 개발에 재투자하는 유기적 순환 구조의 플랫폼으로 만들어질 것입니다.
Similar to the government's creative economy centers, which support manufacturing and ICT-based startups and SMEs, the Creativity Center inside the new complex will help those with ideas create cultural content that can appeal to consumers at home and abroad. CJ, for its part, will offer assistance through some 80 of its content and food experts and promote the products at its global festivals. After an idea goes through planning and production, the product will then be showcased at the K-Culture Valley, a Korean wave contents park featuring a concert hall and film and TV studios set to open in 2017. While President Park anticipates the complex to build a new growth engine, the ultimate success of the project will be determined once the K-Culture Valley is completed and begins to generate profit and create jobs. 최유선, 아리랑 뉴스.
Ultra-right-wing groups in Japan are holding a lot of hate speech rallies targeting ethnic Koreans these days, and the campaigns have stopped short of any physical violence, but there are real worries now that things could turn a lot uglier. But while local governments in Japan are calling for legal measures to ban such rallies, the central Abe administration is turning a blind eye. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Insults against Koreans fly across the streets of the Japanese capital, Tokyo. The number of hate rallies against some 500,000 ethnic Koreans has risen sharply in Japan. The campaigners say they cannot tolerate the privileges, such as the right to vote and access to welfare, bestowed to Korean residents. They justify the racial discrimination as their right to freedom of speech.
What I'm doing is politics. Some say politics and discrimination is different, but it's all the same.
It's a serious matter that has been taken to the international stage. In August, the United Nations Human Rights Committee demanded Japan add hate speech to legislation that bans racial discrimination. In December, the Supreme Court upheld a ruling by Osaka's High Court, the city with the largest Korean population, which ordered an ultra-right group pay a $120,000 fine for its hate speech rally. But the Abe administration has remained passive, saying the issue is under review. Since the beginning of the year, 24 local governments have taken the matter into their own hands, pressuring the central government to take legal measures.
It's extremely dangerous to protect comments like kill someone under the banner of freedom of expression.
While the Abe administration turns a blind eye to racial discrimination, concerns are rising as ultra-right-wing groups are planning a large-scale hate speech rally later this month. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
The United States has underlined its determination to degrade and destroy the Islamic State militant group wherever they exist. Flanked by top officials from his administration, President Barack Obama requested Congress give authorization for military action against IS and stated there is only going to be one winner in the war. Kim Min-ji reports.
U.S. President Barack Obama has made a formal request to Congress to authorize military force against a terrorist group that calls itself Islamic State.
This resolution reflects our core objective to destroy ISIL. It supports the comprehensive strategy that we've been pursuing with our allies and our partners.
In a televised speech, Obama noted the military campaign is a difficult mission, but said the U.S. is on the front foot and IS is going to lose. The request does not call for the deployment of ground troops, although a separate letter to Congress stated it will be limited to rescue operations or the use of special operations forces to take military action against the extremist group's leadership. While there's general support for the plan, the Republicans want stronger measures and some Democrats say the resolution goes too far. If the request is approved, it would authorize a military campaign for 3 years without geographical restrictions. It would also be the first war authorization since then-President George W. Bush, who sought authority to wage war in Iraq in 2002. The U.S. has conducted airstrikes against IS targets in Iraq and Syria since August last year, leading a coalition of Western and Arab nations. Obama said that although existing statutes provide him with the authority to take these actions, Congress backing would show the world that the U.S. is united in its resolve to crush IS. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now back here in Korea and to the trial that has gripped the nation for months now, and it might be over soon as the verdict hearing for the former vice president of Korean Air is scheduled for this afternoon. This comes after prosecutors sought a 3-year prison term for Jo Hyun-ah earlier this month for violating aviation safety regulations, assault on a plane and coercion. They added that Jo has shown no sign of genuine remorse for her actions. The former executive has continued to blame the crew for her decision to order a senior crew member to deplane in New York last December after they did not follow the proper procedure for serving macadamia nuts. Traffic is flowing again on a bridge near Incheon International Airport some 24 hours after a massive car pileup involving over 100 vehicles. The accident happened after a taxi in the first lane rear-ended another taxi in the second lane on the Yeongjong Bridge. An airport bus then crashed into the second taxi, causing the horrific chain reaction. 2 people have been confirmed dead and more than 60 others were injured, with at least 10 of them seriously injured. More than a dozen foreign nationals were also among the injured. The area was covered by a blanket of thick fog at the time of the accident, and drivers told police that roads were slippery at the time. The authorities are still going over lots of CCTV footage and also dashcam recorders to try and work out what exactly happened. One of Korea's oldest nuclear reactors may be shut down forever very soon. The lifespan of the 32-year-old Wolsong reactor has been up for debate for a long time now, as it was supposed to be closed after 30 years. If it is closed, it will be the first reactor in the country to be shut down. The Nuclear Safety and Security Commission is going to announce its decision on this Thursday. The organisation claims the reactor is still in good enough condition to actually operate for another 10 years. But citing safety concerns, residents and environmentalists are demanding the reactor be closed permanently. A court in Italy has handed down a guilty verdict and a 16-year jail sentence to the runaway captain of the doomed cruise liner, the Costa Concordia. For more, we connect to Eunice Kim at the News Centre. Eunice, we understand really that this judgment came fairly quickly considering everything at play here.
That's right, Mark. It took the panel of 3 judges just about 5 hours to reach that guilty verdict that capped a 19-month trial, handing some sort of resolution to the grieving family members of those aboard Costa Concordia that fateful January day. Francesco Schettino was at the helm in 2012 when the giant ship moved too close to shore and crashed on the rocks off the Tuscan island of Giglio. He fled the ship before his passengers and crew of 4,200 people were rescued, from which 32 people ultimately were discovered lifeless. Now, despite the 54-year-old's tearful plea that he was being made a scapegoat and that he was only partially responsible, the judges found him guilty of multiple charges of manslaughter for causing that accident and then abandoning ship. Schettino and his defense team had requested a plea bargain, which was also denied. They are expected to appeal that verdict.
Well, let's turn our attention to Yemen now then, Eunice. And the small Arab nation has been a very important ally in the international coalition against the Islamic State militant group, but has been unraveling very quickly over there. And now, in fact, Western governments are pulling their embassy staff out of the country, which is fair to say is quickly sliding headfirst into complete and utter chaos.
Yeah, and embassy officials also urging their citizens in the country of Yemen to leave immediately before they themselves left, citing deepening security concerns amid the political vacuum left essentially after Yemen's president had quit in the face of pressure from the Houthi rebels. Now, hours after Western nations closed their embassies and pulled their personnel from the capital of Sana'a, tens of thousands of Yemenis filled the streets in one of the largest protests the city has seen since the ouster on January 22nd. Now, those protests are said to have spread to other cities as well. They are demanding that the president and prime minister be reinstated. They chanted anti-Houthi slogans and also rejected the militia's seizure of key checkpoints and government buildings, as well as its constitutional declaration that essentially did dissolve the incumbent government. Now, earlier, a Pentagon spokesman had indicated the deteriorating security situation in Yemen would inevitably have an impact on anti-terror operations.
There's no question, as a result of the political instability in Yemen, that our counterterrorism capabilities have been affected. I couldn't stand up here and tell you that they haven't been. Of course they have been. And I've said before that obviously doing counterterrorism in a foreign country, it's always better to do it when you have an effective, reliable partner. Right now, that partner, the country, the Yemeni security forces and the government to which they report is very much in flux right now.
The U.S. and Britain both pulled their last diplomats from Sana'a on Wednesday, while Germany closed but kept its embassy staff on the ground for now. France said it would be closing its embassy on Friday. Now, U.S. officials denying earlier reports that Houthi rebels had seized their weapons and vehicles from the embassy's convoy while en route to the airport. That, according to CNN. Now, UN brokered talks continue in Yemen between the Shiite rebels and political parties as they try to form a new government. Mark.
Very, very tense times over there in Yemen, especially if you're a foreign embassy worker. You might be thinking time is now to get out. Well, thank you very much, Eunice, and we'll see you back at noon.
Sure thing.
Eating healthily is something most of us try to do, but it turns out that food we once thought was pretty bad for us might not be that bad at all. A government advisory panel in the United States says, contrary to past recommendations, we shouldn't really worry about having too much cholesterol in our diets. Kwon-soo reports.
Before, when you reached out for food high in cholesterol like eggs or shrimps, you might have thought twice, especially if you're an older adult. But now researchers in the U.S. say you might be all right to tuck into your heart's content after all. At least that's what an influential nutrition advisory panel in the U.S. says, as it scrapped a warning against LDL cholesterol, often dubbed as the bad cholesterol, from its nutrition guidelines. In a first in 40 years, the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee's decision also runs counter to its last reform made 5 years ago, when it advised people to take in less than 300 milligrams of cholesterol a day, which is equivalent to the amount found in an egg. The instructional changes come as more nutritionists say years of research show that high cholesterol food does not greatly influence the health of ordinary adults. They believe that consuming these foods doesn't significantly raise levels of cholesterol in the blood or increase the risk of heart disease. Having too many foods high in saturated fats like butter and red meat, they say, is much more dangerous. The guidelines also warns patients with diabetes to still be cautious when eating high cholesterol foods. The committee plans to send its final draft to the government's Health and Agriculture Department in order to issue its 2015 dietary guidelines for the public. While some experts say cholesterol should have been dropped off the warning list years ago, others remain skeptical and still stand by previous research. Kwon-soo, Arirang News.
Now, a night at the opera is usually an experience reserved for special occasions, but here in Seoul, opera has been made much more accessible through a new trend that's catching on very quickly. Im Hyun-hee reports.
You can always head to the local theater for a quick action film or a comedy. But why not broaden your horizons and check out a live performance of a world-famous opera? There's nothing quite like the grandeur of an opera, with stunning stage effects and rich voices that soar through the air. Now the splendor of the experience is available at your local movie theater.
It's hard to get your hands on tickets for local opera performances, plus they're so expensive. Now you can appreciate an opera performance at your local movie theater, and the response has been great.
The performers may be thousands of miles away, but the huge screen and crystal clear HD quality makes it hard to not feel like you're right there with them.
I really enjoyed it. You can see world-famous opera singers for such a reasonable price. It was a great experience.
It's a new trend that's catching on quickly, making the opera an experience that everyone, anywhere, can enjoy. Im Hyun-hee, Arirang News.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off with a major figure skating event set to take place in Seoul later today as the Four Continents Figure Skating Championships kicks off at the Mokdong Ice Rink. Now, with all the non-European figure skaters competing starting today until Sunday, some of the biggest names in the sport will come together. Now, this of course includes names like Gracie Gold of the United States and Rika Hango of Japan, while Korea will be represented by names like Park So-yeon and Kim Hae-jin in the ladies single and Kim Jin-seo over in the men's single. Now, the event has so far been dominated by the US, Canada, China, and Japan, with those four countries winning 190 medals out of 192, with Korea and Uzbekistan winning the other two. Now, I do love to get in my 18 holes of golf time to time. It's just can't afford it here in Korea. In fact, I'm not the only one here in Korea that thinks it's too expensive to play on the course. But now, the Korean government is planning to change all that in hopes to popularize the sport. Now, on Wednesday, a government official stated that President Park Geun-hye has highlighted the need to popularize the sport and get more people to play by making the courses more accessible to the public. With a trip to a golf course costing roughly $300 per person, the government plans to turn private golf courses that are struggling or on the brink of bankruptcy into public courses, making the green fees a lot cheaper. Of course, President Park Geun-hye is an honorary chairwoman of the upcoming President's Cup, which will take place in Korea later this year and fall. Now, after the 2015 Asian Cup in Australia, many of the players, of course, returned to their clubs, and head coach Uli Stilicke is enjoying a nice, well-deserved vacation. But come March, they're all coming back together as the March schedule has been finalized for the national team. Now, in preparations for the World Cup qualifiers set to begin in June, the Korean national football team has been looking for opponents for their March friendlies. And on Wednesday, the KFA has finalized that schedule, with the national team facing off against Uzbekistan on March 27th, followed by New Zealand on March 31st. Now, of course, the dates have been set, but a venue has not yet been decided just yet. Now, I've mentioned this several times, but the popularity of baseball here in the nation is bigger than ever. And the KBO knows this, which is why they've decided to start a brand identity. Now, this means that everything and anything related to the domestic league will be identified with KBO, meaning the league will now no longer be just called the KBO, but the KBO League starting in 2015. But not only that, all KBO events must have KBO in front of the event title as the league continues to make changes to the most popular league here in Korea. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Well, today will be 4 to 5 degrees cooler than yesterday, so dress accordingly to stay warm as the strongest winds will add a chill to the air. And the skies will be clear and the air quality thankfully improved for the upper provinces, but some regions down south will have high level fine dust till noon, but that strongest wind should push away all the lingering dust by the midday. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in Seoul will climb up to 3, while the top temperatures in Daegu and Gwangju should rise to 7 and 6 respectively. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should rise to 8 and 5 and Dokdo peaks at 3. That's all for the weather. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Jion, for the weather forecast. We'll be back with our next newscast at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.